So one day I got up. This was in the spring, and we had a lot of rain for maybe about 4 or 5 days in a row. And my home was in a floodplain. Never really had any issues. But I looked outside, and my garage, which was detached, was surrounded by water, and the back part of my backyard was underwater. And so I was like, oh no. So I opened the garage door, and my car was in there. But what came floating around my car? Paper towels and puppy pads. And so I was like, oh no. And instantly I just started thinking, oh my money! Oh my money! And so floating, the stuff is floating, and I put my little boots on and my little rain gear, and I go out, and I'm trying to, salvage what I can salvage, take everything out, put little tables up, set things on tables so they could dry, because there's some other things in there as well. And as I'm doing this, I'm in the time of crisis, I always get calm. So I'm, processing and trying to make sure that I don't go berserk and get too upset. So I'm just like, okay, God, calm me down. It's, it's you that gives me wealth. You'll give it back to me. And I'm just going on. And he's like, well, thank you for inviting me into this moment. And so I'm like, well, what is this all about? And his question to me was, it really changed the trajectory of a lot of my mentalities. And what he asked me while I was putting stuff up and trying to, salvage what I can salvage, he said, what did you lose? And so I said, okay. So I'm thinking, okay, he's asking me these questions to calm me down, not so much. And so I'm like, okay, God, I guess it wasn't that much. I lost some paper towels and some puppy pads, and it's okay. And so he was like, no, don't minimize what you lost. What did you lose? And so then I'm thinking, okay, well, I guess we're going someplace else. So I'm like, 20, 40, 60, 80, 1, 20. Okay, I lost about maybe $300. I guess in the grand scheme of things, that's not so much. And he said, what did you lose? And I'm like, well, God, I guess I don't understand the question, because I'm thinking I'm answering the question that you're asking me, and clearly I'm not answering the question. So tell me what I lost, or tell me what it is I'm missing. And he, instead of answering my question, he said, remember I told you that as long as you walk with me and as long as you obey me, you will suffer no loss and no lack. And I said, yeah, you did. He said, $300 is still a loss. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not that big of a deal. You'll provide, you'll replace it, and you'll multiply. He said, but that goes counter to what I told you. So where's the breach? And so that started a process between him and I that changed my whole perspective. And it also kind of put something in my face that I wasn't aware of. So losses and lack are indicators of a breach in our hearing and obeying and or staying in step with the Spirit of God, places that we have wandered off. Because his promise to us is that we would never suffer lack and never suffer loss as long as we're hearing and obeying and staying in step with him. So when we recognize spaces in our lives where there's loss and there's lack, we need to tap in, press in, and start asking some questions, okay? And so yes, ma'am. The breach is coming. It's coming. Wait for it. So my question to us, taking it from me for a second, how and where is God using occurrences in our lives, feelings, losses, etc., to reveal unsurrendered places and areas that he's illuminating so that he can heal them and or mature us? What I learned, I'll just jump to that for a second. What I learned was, rather than surrendering and trusting him in lean seasons, I had solved my own problem. I had made my own solution. Nothing I was doing was built out of trusting God. I wasn't doing that in faith. That wasn't a strategy that the Lord had given me. That was a solution I created. And so because when anything that is self-generated and self-produced cannot be God-protected because it's not God-surrendered. And so the breach that came in, the reason why because he could have, but he chose not to preserve my $300 worth of stuff, was because that was an area that he wanted to show me, you're not trusting me here. And so some of the areas of loss and lack are opportunities for us to see what we're really doing, to see places. How many of us, when and as we recognize that God is asking, do you love me? Do you trust me? That we, in truth, and I say it all the time, God, I trust you with my life. And I mean it. I trust you with everything I have. I trust you with everything I have. I trust you with everything I have. And then he'll push you in an area or show you something, and it's like, I ain't doing that. Why would I do that? That don't make sense. And he'll use these spaces in these areas to show us unsurrendered places where he wants to show us, you don't trust me here. You haven't surrendered this. Because if you did, it wouldn't be a fight. You wouldn't have a strategy that I didn't give you. You wouldn't have, and again, some of it, is women being who we are, because this is a women's class. Well, we are solution-oriented. We want to find a solution. We want to prepare. We don't want to be caught off guard. We don't want to have to try to figure it out in the moment, because we have to do that enough. So as much and as often as possible, we want to prepare. But that preparation looks different when it's self-produced rather than when it's God-inspired and God-provided. And everything that we do, in him we live, in him we move, in him we have our being. If we're not doing it in him, through him, by him, influenced, directed because of him, it's self-produced. And anything self-produced is not God-protected. Okay? So often we stay in cycles of lack, loss, frustration, etc., because we miss or ignore these moments, passing them off as something else. I missed them, I'm sure, for years, because I've been doing that for years, and calling it wisdom, calling it being responsible, calling it preparation. And one of the things beyond just showing me a place that was unsurrendered and that I wasn't trusting him in and trusting him with, was he also showed me a cycle that I did not know I had. If you had told me, if a person would have told me prior to that, I'd have been like, that's not me. He was showing me that I was operating in areas of perfectionism, number one, and operating in spaces where I felt like if I didn't do something right, then God wouldn't favor me. It was rooted in perfectionism, saying if I made a mistake or if I didn't act wisely or if I messed up some money, then whatever happened to me happened, and God wouldn't take care of it, because why would he? I'm the one that messed it up. But that demonstrated, so you don't trust that I will take care of you in spite of you. You don't trust that I love you in spite of your abilities or lack thereof. And so again, he gives us these moments that drifting down the driveway, I mean, it was a sight, floating down the driveway, puppy pads. He gives us these moments where they could have turned into something totally different, to say, this ain't about puppy pads. This ain't about $300 of paper towels. This is not what that's about. This is about an area I want you to get closer to me in, because this keeps me from you in a space that I want you closer. So again, being visual. You can think of this however you need to. If you think about, our intimate relationship with God and how his desire is for us to be face-to-face, because that's a part of our restored benefit through Jesus, is that, remember prior to the fall of man, that Adam and Eve walked and talked with God in the cool of the day. They were naked and unashamed. That's what we have now, the benefit of having an intimate relationship with Jesus. But oftentimes we don't take that benefit because we don't really want to get that exposed in certain places. And as he's touching and talking, we will again call it something else. Lord, I do trust you. Yeah, I'm trusting you. That's why I'm doing this. I got this extra money, so that's why I'm doing this, And as he's pushing and leaning into those spaces and saying, that's not what that is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It affects our intimacy. It keeps you cannot produce and reproduce with all your clothes on. At some point, you have to expose yourself in order to have a measure of intimacy. And that's what God has designed us for. He's designed us to get close, to get breath to breath, face to face, cheek to cheek intimacy. So we must learn the journey. We must learn in the journey of becoming more and more who we were created to be honest with God, ourselves, and about what we do and why. Not just what we do, again, calling it something else, but why am I doing that? Are we pretending? Again, are we calling it something else? And then after we know what it really is, are we willing for him to search us out and give us insight as to why do I really do that? Does anything come to mind as we're having this conversation? Because that's what the Holy Spirit does. He starts stirring stuff, and it's like, oh, man, I am doing that. Anybody have anything that's coming to mind? Yes, ma'am.
Knowledge, can you not know, what the Lord sometimes wants you to do?
Okay. Yeah, sometimes you don't know what you're doing, but that's when he allows these things to happen. And as they're happening, he'll start stirring and walking closer and, kind of pushing you. Listen for his voice and listen for his answer. Because he wants you to know. He wants you to know. Anything come? Yes, ma'am.
I could truly relate to what you were saying. I really could. We often talk about our God being a God of excellence. And I'm one that operates in excellence. But what I came to realize, it was a fleshy excellence. And what he showed me was I wasn't seeking him for what I did. It was like, I've got to do this in excellence. It's got to be perfect. That perfectionism you talked about. So, yeah, he will show you over time. Or he sent another sister to reveal it to me. She said, what about his excellence? What about his excellence? Did you seek him? Motivation. What is your motivation behind that? It's what you see as excellence. What is God saying about it? So, yeah, it was a hard lesson, but I got it.
Anybody else? Anything else comes to mind? For anybody else, as we've been talking, areas that you've learned or that you've seen or that he's spoken to you in like fashion? Anybody else want to share?
Learning. So I can completely relate. And I realize it's because I'm impatient. And I'll find myself in situations like you were saying, oh, the winter months are coming. So I'm looking at the time and I'm praying. And if I haven't heard, I'm like, all right, yeah, I would get puppy pads too. But sometimes there's obedience in doing nothing. If God didn't tell you to move or didn't give you the exact instruction, I've understood now. Sometimes it's best to not do stuff because sometimes I rush ahead and then I find myself in a big mess that I'm crying he's got to clean up. So I think a lot of it's rooted in not necessarily disobedience. It is disobedience, but it's disobedience because of being impatient.
Anybody else? Thank you. No? Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, those that have. So one of the reasons why I opened it up and asked is because I want us to, number one, be comfortable sharing, but also because this is a shared experience. We all do this. We all have these moments, and whether we are in a place of acknowledgement or awareness or not, the Bible talks about we all like sheep have gone astray, and it also says that our hearts are prone to wander, which means, again, if the promise of the Lord is, as you walk with me and as you obey me, you will never suffer lack or loss. We've suffered lack, we've suffered loss. So that means at some places we have wandered off to the left or to the right some kind of way. And that's a human and a natural thing to do. And so there's no shame in it. The only shame is when we refuse and ignore. We refuse to acknowledge that we've wandered off and get back on track, repent and come on back. And then we want to cover it up. That's what got Adam and Eve even deeper in their stuff, because rather than saying, uh-oh, and turning to the Father, they then tried to conceal. They started operating in places of self-help, and then they dug themselves deeper instead of potentially, we don't know, been able to find some measure of grace in that. So what are you calling that which is destroying your peace. So when you are lacking in a place of peace, that's an indicator of an area that's probably unsurrendered. So if there's an anxiety, now the evidences of the spirit of fear, worry, anxiety, and dread. Now, sometimes, more so in my past, I would get into fits of worry. I overcame that by the blood of the Lamb. Thank you, Jesus. The anxiety part, but when I found out dread was an aspect of fear, I was like, oh, yeah. Because there are often things that I know I have to do or getting ready to happen, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. There's huge amounts of dread. That is an indicator of the presence of the spirit of fear. And so, again, those I use my feelings, and I encourage you to. I use my feelings a little differently than most of us do. When I start feeling stuff, I take it as a symptom. And so like we would, if you start sneezing and coughing, you don't, just then say, oh, I got croup. Oh, I got COVID. It's like something is happening in my body. Let me start paying attention to what's going on to these symptoms and then start getting proactive. Let me put some more clothes on and stop wearing summer clothes in the wintertime. Let me start taking my vitamins and, let me go to bed at night. I start paying attention so that whatever this dis-ease or whatever these symptoms are, I can start kind of tracking and figuring out what's going on and get the help that I need to get healthy. Same thing with my feelings. When I start feeling something and it's more than just a minute, it's like, something's up. And what's behind it? Not sitting in my feelings, be like, you just in your feelings. I don't have time to be in my feelings because that's not going to help me. And I've learned that they kind of grow after that. So when you start feeling something and you feel it over and over and over again, start asking some questions. Treat them like it's symptoms. God, what is this? What am I feeling? And truly, again, we're women. Is this my hormones? Is this environmental? Am I being impatient? Am I being unreasonable? Is there something I'm lacking? Am I not trusting you in an area? Start asking questions because you want to get to the root of that. Am I afraid of something? What is this feeling? Is this feeling attached to worry? Is this feeling attached to anxiety? Is this attached to dread? Because that means there's an area that I need to come to you and surrender and let you work out this space in me so that I can get safe in you again. So that as I meet this and as we walk through this, that I can walk through this in a different level of confidence that I'm obviously not walking in right now. And then I can be healed. Okay? Any questions so far? No? Okay. So women must learn the journey of becoming more and more of who we were created to be honest with God and ourselves, again, about who we are and why. What are you calling that which is destroying your peace? We talked about that for a second. I called it wisdom. I called it preparation. I called it being preemptive. I called it being responsible. It was absolutely none of those things. It was a fear of lack. It was perfectionism. It was all the things that we discussed. It was an unsurrendered place in my soul that I did not recognize, that I didn't trust God, and so I had started taking care of myself. And so if I am running around here saying, and my God shall supply all of my needs, but most of my needs, I'm supplying myself. I'm doing this to God's hand every time he wants to extend himself to take care of my needs, to supply for me. I've already done that. I did that already. I took care of that already. I bought that 6 months ago, so I don't have to worry about that next month. Absolutely. I'm smacking down the presence and the power of God. And who knows what the way God, well, I do know. After I stopped doing that, the provision was just there. It was just there. He just always provided. And the things that I was afraid that would happen, of course they never happened, but even if they did, it was an opportunity for me to trust God and to learn even the more through that. Turn to Luke 12. If you have the book, it's actually on page 183. I want to read this really quickly. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to read Luke chapter 12, verses 16 through 27, and then jump down to 30 and read 30 through 33. Okay, are we there? Okay. And it reads as follows. This is in the voice version that I'm reading it from, which is in the book. Then the beginning, another parable. A wealthy man owned some land that produced a huge harvest. He often thought to himself, I have a problem here. I don't have anywhere to store all my crops. What should I do? I know. I'll tear down a small barn and build even bigger ones, and then I'll have plenty of storage space for my grain and all my other goods. Then I'll be able to say to myself, I have made it. I can relax and take it easy for years. So I'll sit back, eat, drink, and have a good time. Then God interrupted the man's conversation with himself. So he was talking to himself. God wasn't nowhere involved in this plan. Okay? Excuse me, Mr. Brilliant, but your time has come. Tonight you will die. Now who will enjoy everything that you've earned and saved? This is how it will be for people who accumulate huge assets for themselves but have no assets in relation to God. Then to his disciples, Jesus said, this is why I keep telling you not to worry about anything in life, about what you will eat, about how you'll clothe your body. Life is more than food and the body is more than fancy clothes. Think about the crows flying over there. Do they plant and harvest crops? Do they own silos or barns? Look at them fly. It looks like God is taking pretty good care of them, doesn't it? Remember that you are more precious to God than birds. Which one of you can add a single hour to your life or 18 inches to your height by worrying really hard? If worry can't change anything, then why do you do it so much? Think about those beautiful wild lilies growing over there. They don't work up a sweat toiling for needs or wants. They don't worry about clothing. Yet the great King Solomon never had an outfit that was half as glorious as theirs. Now jump down to verse 30. People of the world who don't know God pursue these things, but you have a Father caring for you, a Father who knows all your needs. Since you don't need to worry about security and safety, about food and clothing, then pursue God's kingdom first and foremost, and these other things will come to you as well. My little flock, don't be afraid. God is your Father, and it's your Father's great joy to give you his kingdom. And we'll stop there. So if you look at verse 31 in this version, the voice version that's in the book, the words that pop out there are worry, security, safety, and then in verse 32, afraid. So all of those things, those worries, those feelings of insecurity and lacking safety that we all have experienced, keep us from pursuing the kingdom and the things that really matter, which is why the enemy loves to keep us cycling in these spaces and in these places. If we stay there, we'll never get closer to God and we'll never fully manifest and accomplish the purposes of God. Yes, ma'am.
I'm also sometimes thinking, aren't we supposed to do some preparation? I mean, how do we know what we're not supposed to prepare for? Because we got to do some work, right? Okay.
So what it looks like to us is one thing. What it looks like to God is the same. So again, the promise of God is as long as you walk with me, stay in step with me, and you obey me, I got this. It's when we wander off to our own ideas of preparation that we run into trouble. So as we're walking in step with him, he's walking and talking with us. And he's telling us what needs to be done. If you haven't ever done this, do this. Go set your clock for an hour. If you can't do it an hour, try 10 minutes. And focus those 10 minutes on, I'm not going to do anything unless I sense, feel, hear, whatever your senses are. Smell, taste, God saying to do it. You would be amazed what you do. And that's really what God has designed us and is now increasing in us, to be able to learn how to live in this body, live in this mind, live with our soul in the place of our soul, but then increase the more in our sensitivity to hear, obey, and walk with him. And so that's why we need grace, because our hearts are prone to wander. We're going to wander, and in those, we have grace as he brings us back and teaches us. That's why you don't want to do that. That's why you want to stay in step with me. I'll give us this example. I'm sure we've all experienced this because it happens like 50 times a day for me, and I'm always like, I got to do better. So have you ever been getting dressed in the morning, felt, sensed, heard, I should grab this umbrella? And you're like, I live in Arizona, it ain't going to rain. And you go outside, and you go on about your day. It starts raining or something's happening, and you're like, that's why I was supposed to grab that umbrella. Those are opportunities where, again, along the way, he's talking to us. And, again, his voice is not like, grab the umbrella. It's, grab that umbrella. Those are the aspects that you're talking about. We're supposed to do something. Our responsibility is to hear and obey. Hear and obey. Stay sensitive to him and do what he says. And so he already knows the plan, that he has for us. And his plans are always good to prosper us and to bring us to an expected end. How we get to that is by hearing and obeying and following him. He has the plan. Sometimes he'll share the plan with us. Most of the time, we don't get that much of the plan because we're so smart. We'll start saying, oh, yeah, he told me that such and such was going to happen, so let me do this. Guilty. I've shared, I think it was in Bible study once, about how the Lord asked me, I was like 20-something, 20 stupid, okay? And met this gentleman in passing, and after I met him the first time, the Lord asked me, would you love him? And this was after I met him and then went on about my business. And he said, would you love him? And I was like, I love anybody you tell me to. I love people, period. And he was like, okay. And so as he would have it, he brought him back around, and again, only by God, we started dating. Maybe 2 or 3 years later, we ended up getting engaged. We were engaged for 1.5 years, and 3 months before the wedding, it was called off. And I was just so confused. And I was like, well, God, you told me. He wasn't nobody I'd have chose. I did this because you told me to. You told me to do this. He said, I didn't tell you to marry him. I told you to love him. I didn't tell you to do that. I told you to love him. You did that. Now move on. And that was a huge lesson, because it showed me how you tell me a little something, and I went and was like, well, I'm supposed to do this with that. And he's like, this is why I give you instruction. Do what I say and stop trying to think through the instruction. I know what I've designed, and I know what I want to do through this. And that's why we do some of the stuff that we do, because he gives us a piece, and we take the piece and we make it into something different. And I thank God, and I say this, and wonderful human being he was. He's deceased now. But knowing now if I knew then what I know now, it was part of God's divine design to stop that when he stopped it. Wonderful person. But that would have changed the trajectory of my life, and I would have never been who he wanted me to be if I'd have done what I thought God wanted me to do. So again, history, our experiences, train us to believe and live out of the lies that we believe. So the lie that I believed was, if I wasn't responsible, if I didn't do the right things, if I didn't plan, if I didn't prepare, I was going to be in a place of lack. I was going to not have something I need. I was going to struggle. All of those lies that I believe provoked some action. I started living out of that lie based on some history. I probably had lack in another area, and I was like, I know not to do that anymore. And so I devised a plan after that to make sure that I never saw that again. And so to share with my sisters, I want to say, your history is not prophecy. We think if we've seen it before, if I don't do something, I'm going to see it again, and this is going to be my life. Your history is not prophecy. Your history is an opportunity to learn and to surrender even the more. Amen? Okay. What has your history trained you to do, to believe, and from that, how have you behaved? What has your history trained you to believe? What's the lie you believe based on what you've experienced so far? And what do you do because of that? How are you living that out? And how are you behaving because of that? The C clause to that is from that, what I, again, didn't realize then is it was very hard for me to respect people who didn't prepare. And I had no mercy for a person who was just like, I'm just going to do whatever. It's like, you ain't right. I had judged them, and it was like, oh, I would never help you because, I'm the one that saved my little money, and I prepared. You didn't prepare. You ain't got nothing. That's your problem. There was no mercy for that. And I didn't even realize. I thought, again, that's wisdom. I decided, and it caused me to lack mercy, to lack judgment, godly judgment, because whoever God would have told me to share, to give, that's for him to deal with, them and how they do it. And it's for me to obey. I was deciding everything based on my belief, based on my history, and based on my thinking. Anybody want any light bulbs?
Even like you, I was exactly that same person. I did have mercy, but I still had my nose turned up at those people because I was doing the same thing. But what God did, I got to a place with all my preparation, with all of my money that I thought I was saving. I was completely in a place at one point of my life where I had nothing. And I was thinking, oh my God, how did I get here? I always saved. And it was like he was telling me, but how do you know that they didn't? And as soon as he said that, I'm like, who? And it was like, oh my God, Vanessa, you were judging people because you don't know what they were going through. And he let me be in that season for a minute. I mean, like I was there for a minute.
Yeah.
And I thought, how do I get out of this? And I tell you now, I have a heart that I never even think about. If you tell me you need something or you're going through something, I honestly don't have any judgment anymore, where I used to would really have that hardcore judging.
He uses these moments to train and retrain, to dig up and to root out. Amen. Thank you for sharing that. So with that, too, I want us to make sure that we don't use these things that the Lord is bringing up as a point of shame. Again, this is a shared experience. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. We all of our hearts are prone to wander. But it is because of the love of God that he chases. That's one of the things I love. One of my favorite words is loving kindness, because excuse me, I had a little head trauma last week, so every now and then I'm stuttering a little bit, so excuse me for that. The Greek word, the Hebrew word for that is hesed, Chesed. And the meaning of that word overwhelms me, because it is a far-reaching, never-ending, always pursuing love. And that's what God has for us, that when we're wandering and when we're off, unlike us, I wouldn't got you a couple times. I ain't going to go I ain't doing all that. You're going to have to find your way back. Same way you found your way lost, you're going to find your way back. And to know that that is not the love of God, that is not the heart of God, that in spite of my limitations in that area, he's like, that's mine, and I want her. I don't care how many times you wander your little silly self over to the left. I'm coming for you, and I'm bringing you back to me, and because I want you. That, when I tell you that humbles me, you want me to cry, and I don't cry very often, but you want me to cry, let me start thinking about that, because that is the epitome of safety. That is the epitome of security, and that is what we all want. And that is what we in Christ all have. That no matter how poorly we behave, no matter how much we go astray, no matter how often we make mistakes, how habitual our stuff is, he still is ever pursuing. He never changes how he feels about us. Oh, my. Oh, my. So, again, his desire is to illuminate those darkened places. So staying in these places, dismissing and ignoring and or refusing to surrender and grow hinders our gender purpose from being active, increasing, and potent. So when we talk about the gender purposes, which call them out, as women, our purposes are support, respiration, protection. So it's not like now that you know I'm going to be these things and it's over. This we know, and God is going to groom and grow us in these spaces incrementally as he desires. And so not being honest and not being willing to lean into these spaces that he's demonstrating in these moments where he's illuminating our darkened places and then showing us how to walk closer to him and how to hear and obey, it keeps those places in us from growing. It keeps us from growing and being life givers. It keeps us from growing in places of being healthy support in the places that God has established. It keeps us from learning to distinguish between our role and our purposes and walking therein appropriately. And God's design and desire is never again to condemn. There is no condemnation. It doesn't exist for those that are in Christ Jesus. That's something we have to stop doing to ourselves. We condemn ourselves, and he's not even interested in that. So again, when we don't do that, we then, when we are not willing to grow in those spaces and take those lessons on, we do something different. We see them, and instead of saying, God, what's this? I need to surrender this area to you, we then start to complain. Think about the times when he's tried to correct something in you, and instead of correcting it, you tried to cover it or call it something else. Then you start complaining about a whole bunch of stuff. And complaining kills and erodes. We start developing critical and judgmental spirits. We want to attack other people's stuff. Like, that ain't right. I ain't doing that. That's her. That ain't me. And that, that. Exactly. And then one of the things that I meant to say, too, when you said it about the sister who helped you, because that's what my mama called her when she was going to whoop us, she didn't call it whooping us. She would say, do you need some help? Because I'll help you. And so I think of that now when someone is correcting me. It's like they're not correcting me, they're helping me. So take it as help, because correction sometimes doesn't feel so good, but help is welcome. You can help me. So again, when we are being helped by our sisters, which we need, we have to be willing at least to listen. And then it may not feel good in the moment, but don't respond in the moment, because then you might miss your opportunity to grow not only as an individual, but grow as a relationship with your sisters. Because when I can trust what you say, even if I don't like it, even if I don't agree with it, even if it's flat out wrong, how I respond to you, because there's a level of security and a level of honor that someone has to give you, to put themselves in a vulnerable position to tell you the truth about yourself when they love you. So they're willing to risk a relationship with you to help you grow. And we have to think about it like that. Instead of, well, she trying to, how you going to tell me you ain't perfect? You get perfect and then tell me something. Instead of, that's the way I think. I'm just saying, that's the way I think. When you get perfect, do that right and tell me how to do it, okay? You can't cook nothing and you want to tell me how to make pot of beans. No, thank you. But again, if you risk the moment, you don't have to be an expert at something to tell somebody something. You may not be able to cook, but you can tell me if it's nasty. So everybody can tell you something. Everybody can tell you something. So again, the development of critical and judgmental spirits separate us from healthy people and healthy encounters. So we don't want that. It also distracts us in prayer and in intercession, because if we are not willing to acknowledge and confront those places that God is trying to highlight in illuminating our darkened places, if we are praying, we then start praying soulish prayers. We're not praying from the mind and the heart of God. We're not praying righteously. We're not praying targeted. We're not praying with the right perspective or the heart of God. We're praying how we feel. And our feelings are an aspect of our soul. And that ain't going nowhere in the presence of the Lord. It's just not. I mean, yes, his desire is that we pour out our complaints, but after you've poured out your complaints, now you have a job that you're supposed to be doing in prayer. There's more than just, laying down, making your request known unto God. There's some work to do in the place of prayer. And you won't get to that place if you stay stuck and you're not willing to acknowledge. Because how many times have you been in prayer or been in worship or been making an attempt in the presence of the Lord just to kind of connect and commune with him. And he start talking to you about you. If it hasn't happened, you haven't been praying, you haven't been communing with God, because that's a regular occurrence that when you are talking in intimate moments with God, that's the best time for him to tell you the things that are on his heart and on his mind that will keep him and you not in the space of being able to openly share, commune, and be relational in intimate spaces. And so when you're not willing to be honest, when you're not willing to call it what it is, and allow him to help you and to bring you out of that and to heal you in those places, then you interrupt your ability in the presence of God to be actionable and to be potent and powerful in the place of prayer and intercession. And that's part of our reality as women. We gotta get that. And so again, it means if you're not producing rightly, we're always producing because we're receivers. We're always taking something in. And if you're not producing rightly, what you're producing is wrong. What you're putting out there and what you're giving is not healthy. And so if we see that in every space of the world, that you see unhealthy people that are multiplying. They may be getting more money, they may be getting more press, they may be getting more followers, but what they're doing is so unhealthy, and it is consuming. You ever been around somebody who, and I hate to say it like this, I don't know what to say, been around somebody who you don't like necessarily to be in a room with when they go in a room because they suck all the air out of the room? And they change the whole flavor of the room. Nothing that you going in the room to do is going to get done when they're in there because their agenda is the motivation of the hour, every hour. And it's just like, oh, here we go. Here we go. That's what that looks like. We're always producing. As women, we're always producing. We're always birthing. But how we birth and what we birth and the health of what we birth and the life of what we birth is determined upon our willingness to be honest and to see ourselves and to surrender that to God. So we know that we were created for greatness and the greatness of God to shine through us, to protect, to bring life and respiration, to support that which God has assigned as our charge. And as we walk together and walk forward as women, we know that we have to do that together. We talked about that we cannot do this whole game of I don't fool with women. We need each other. Period and point blank. And so whatever areas and aspects of our soul that remain unhealed, we have to surrender them to God. We have to get honest about why we feel the way we feel, and we have to learn how to trust him. So let us then, as women, moving forward on our last week together, determine that we are going to share the wisdom and the words of God that will shape, mature, and encourage one another. That we will be iron sharpening iron like a friend sharpens a friend. Let us be trained in transparency, being safe with and for one another. Let us forgive and seek forgiveness actively and humbly. Let us be gracious on purpose, knowing that we ourselves need grace in the same measure, if not multiplied. Let us practice celebrating the uniqueness of God as he gifted the world and he designed the world to be furnished through who he made you to be. Let us learn and appreciate our individual and corporate beauty. Let us grow in respect and honor for the men that God placed in our midst. Let us mature in our expression of honor concerning them, praying, encouraging, tempering our words, and challenging our intentions towards them. Sister, let us stand in the grace and the grandeur of what God has assigned as good. And when he looks at you, Rosanna, when he looks at you, when he looks at you, when he looks at you, when he looks at us all, he says, good. So let us stand in the truth of that and move forward. Father, we bless you and we thank you for this time that you have afforded and blessed us with. We thank you for these 6 weeks and the lessons that you taught us. Now continue, Father, what you started because you promised to do that. We thank you that we are surrendered and surrendering even the more to be trained, to be transformed by your very spirit, to be the women that you have called and purposed us to be. Let us live it out in the roles that you have